Hi, I'm attorney Derek Martin with Driver Defense Team. We're a law firm here in Chicago, Illinois that handles all types of traffic tickets, DUIs, and other driving related issues. A very common one is where a person doesn't have a driver's license, typically because it was revoked. And what that person needs to do is they need to have a hearing with the Secretary of State, and successful hearing where their license gets granted back to them. They are able to have a driver's license again. The reason that someone's license gets revoked in the first place is typically because of a DUI. There may be other reasons. Pretty much any felony that can be used where a vehicle is used can result in a revocation of the driver's license, but by far the most common is a DUI. And if you are convicted of a DUI, then your license will get revoked. It doesn't matter if it's your first DUI, your second DUI, your third DUI. If you ever get convicted of one of those, then your license is going to be revoked. And so the most common scenario is an Illinois driver with an Illinois license who gets a DUI in Illinois. They get revoked and then they have to have a hearing. If they only have one DUI, one drug or alcohol related offense on their record, then they can have an informal hearing. There's a lot of documentation, a drug and alcohol evaluation, some other things that need to be prepared, and then you go and you have that hearing with the Secretary of State. The reason it's informal is because it is more like a conversation. You have to address all the right issues, you have to give sufficient answers, and then the Secretary of State will make a decision as to whether or not you can get that license back. If you have 2 or more DUIs or other drug and alcohol related offenses, then you're going to be required to have a formal hearing with the Illinois Secretary of State. And it is just like it sounds. It's a bit more formal in the sense that it's more like a courtroom atmosphere or courtroom setting. Everything that is said is recorded. There are some more procedures that are involved. There is like judge basically, as well as an attorney for the Secretary of State there, along with you and your attorney at that formal hearing. And again, at the end of that formal hearing, the Secretary of State makes a decision. And that decision is one of 3 things. They can either deny you outright, and that does happen. They can deny you outright and you get no relief. You get no driver's license. On the other end of the spectrum, they can reinstate your full driver's license. There's some scenarios where multiple DUIs, that's not possible initially or at all. But typically, if you have 2 DUIs or so, then yes, the Secretary of State could give you your full driver's license. They also quite commonly do something in the middle, which is called the restricted driving permit. A restricted driving permit is just like it sounds. You are restricted from driving, except for very specific scenarios, typically going to work or school, maybe for medical appointments, picking kids up from school, things like that. There's very specific reasons and places where you are allowed to drive. Outside of that, it's like you don't even have a license. So those are the 3 things that can happen. We've talked about the informal hearings, we've talked about the formal hearings, but we have not yet discussed the out-of-state hearings. This can come up in a number of different scenarios, and it's typically where the person does not live in Illinois. It's why it's an out-of-state hearing. The most common that we see is where the person did have an Illinois license at one point, and maybe they got that DUI in Illinois, or maybe they got it in another state, but for whatever reason, their license in Illinois was revoked, and now they live somewhere else. They live in another state, and they're trying to get their license. Unfortunately, most of the time, that new state, that place where they live now, is never ever going to give them a license because Illinois has a hold still. In these computer systems, these secretaries of state, they have a compact where they all talk. And so that new state, say the person is now living in, doesn't matter, California or wherever, and they're looking to get a license, California is going to inquire with Illinois through the computer system, and they're going to see that there's a hold. So that person's never going to get that California license unless they have a hearing with the Secretary of State to remove that hold. Since that person doesn't live in Illinois, they would have that hearing as an out-of-state hearing. We can help them with that. Attorneys often do help people with that because, again, there's a lot of documentation and questions and things that need to be answered properly if you think you're ever going to get that hold released. Another scenario where a driver may have an out-of-state hearing is where that person, again, does not live in Illinois, but never did. So it's very similar to the last, but that person was maybe just in Illinois visiting and they got a DUI. Now, yes, it got reported back to their home state, but Illinois also made a record of that DUI as well. And they created a driver's license number, they have all that person's information, and they have a hold again. So that person now wants to go back to their home state or any other state, they need to have an out-of-state hearing in order to release that hold. And the third, and maybe less common, is where that person never even had any driver's license at all. But again, since the DUI was in Illinois, Illinois has a record of it. So if that person wants to go apply and get a license in Illinois or anywhere else, they're going to need to have a hearing. If they live out of state, that can be an out-of-state hearing. So I hope that is a helpful overview. It is certainly not the entire story. There are many, many different scenarios here that may be raised in many, many different scenarios that can be unique to you in your situation. So this was just a simple overview of the 3 types of hearings: informal, formal, and out of state, and then the 3 different outcomes that can be performed or can be completed here. And that is a denial, an approval, or a restricted driving permit. So I hope that gives you a bit of a framework on how you can now proceed forward with having a hearing and possibly getting your license back. I do recommend that you do speak with an attorney about this. It is a very difficult, very complicated process. The Secretary of State does not make it easy on you. An attorney can probably be pretty helpful for you. I hope this was helpful, and if you want to talk more about it, just let us know. Thank you for watching.